The Donald Trump presidency has started, and I will look at the environmental impact. I will say first that people deserve to have their identities respected, and this includes everyone. And Donald Trump was wrong to impose his ideology on everyone and to discriminate against transgender individuals and non-binary individuals. So that is genocide, what he's doing. But today I will look at some of the environmental impacts of Donald Trump's decisions. So I have an article from the NPR. Trump's energy emergency is a gift to fossil fuel firms. It's likely headed to court. There's a quote, "We will drill, baby, drill." And that was in the inauguration speech. Oh, and this is by Jeff Brady in the NPR. One of the national emergency is... One of the executive orders is a national energy emergency, which will, from the article, sidestep bureaucratic processes and public notifications. So the public won't know about some of the proposals, potentially. They're suspending some of the environmental regulations under landmark laws, including the Endangered Species Act, and speeding up energy project approvals. There's a lack of inclusion of wind and solar power, and that is about 14% of the energy generation in the US. And then there's a quote from Sam Sandcole, an attorney and senior leader with Oath Justice, is striking that the emergency he seems to be declaring is one of a lack of fossil fuel productions. The US is currently producing more oil and gas than any nation on the planet ever has in the history of human civilization. And we know that fossil fuels contribute to greenhouse gases and the climate change, and will make extreme weather worse. And there's no mention of the climate heating effects of burning fossil fuels. It will allow the deployment of oil drilling rigs, including on protected land. And protected land is protected for a number of reasons, but including for endangered species, recreation, protecting the landscape is important, and indigenous protection is important. The indigenous population isn't always protected by federal land. There's a history of discrimination in terms of protecting land. Sometimes a lot of times indigenous people were cleared from land that is now quote protected. That is a conversation to have as well. But we should be protecting natural spaces. Yeah, and then if we don't protect natural spaces, then what happens is those increased flooding, those increased forest fires, and drinking water quality would go down. There's a variety of impacts, both global, nationally, and locally. And then those environmental groups might challenge this. And then there's a point made in the article that there's no case law about what constitutes an emergency and when it's appropriate to do so. So I will go to, let's see, registry. I have, I guess I'll do I looked at the declaring a national energy emergency executive order signed on January 20th, 2025. Those talk about like high energy prices, but during severe hurricanes, oil rigs have been offline or damaged, like Hurricane Katrina, and those are more likely as a result of climate change. A lot of hurricanes, like hurricanes can hit oil rigs in the Gulf of Mexico or anywhere where they might be located. And so there is a direct impact from climate change, as climate change will make severe hurricanes more likely to occur over long periods. I should say that there's a difference between climate and weather. Climate is a trend over a long period of time, at least 30 years, and weather is individual events. So I just want to point that out. They say that the U.S. has intermittent energy supply and an unreliable grid. That seems to be an attack on renewable energy. But there is such a thing as batteries, and we can plan for that. And I made a video a couple years ago about Texas power outage, which at the time was, a lot of people blamed it on wind energy, but it was really the fossil fuels. The electrical grid got too cold in the state of Texas. It doesn't say what dangerous state and local policies, but it says dangerous state and local policies jeopardize our nation's core national defense and security needs, without saying what those policies are. And then there's a lot of shall statements. The heads of executive departments and agencies shall identify. So shall, it means like they must. and then facilitate the identification, leasing, siting, production, transportation, refining, and generation of domestic energy resources, including but not limited to on federal lands. And a lot of federal lands have, my understanding is that they have a lot of where the parks and natural reserves are located. So there might be getting closer and closer to natural spaces. The Administrator of Environmental Protection Agency shall consider emergency. So shall consider, that doesn't make sense to me because it's a shall statement. But consider it is less. Like consider, like, sounds like you don't have to do it, but because the shall is in front, you have to do it. They have to do it. So the issuing emergency fuel waivers to allow year-round sale of E15 gasoline to meet any projected temporary shortfalls. I'm not sure what E15 gasoline is. Someone might be interested in filling me in. Let's see. Agencies shall identify and use all relevant lawful and emergency and other authorities available to them to expedite and the completion of all authorized and appropriated infrastructural, energy, and environmental natural resources products that are within the identified authority of each of the secretaries to perform to advance. And then there's to protect the collective national economic security of the United States, agencies shall identify and use all lawful emergency or other authorities available to them to facilitate the supply, refining, and transportation of energy in and through the west coast of the United States, northeast of the United States, and Alaska. There's no mention of Hawaii, which is not part of the... Well, I guess maybe the West... I don't know. There's the Clean Water Act, emergency regulations and nationwide permits. And then there's the shall statement. They shall identify planned or potential actions to facilitate the national energy supply that may be subject to emergency treatment pursuant to regulations and nationwide permits promulgated by the corps. And then they shall provide a summary report listing such actions to the Director of Office of Management and Budget. And then there's this is within 30 days. There's some groups that shall list the status of any previously reported planned or potential actions and shall list any new planned or potential actions that fall within subsection A1. Such status report shall thereafter be provided to these officers at least every 30 days for the duration of national emergency and may be combined as appropriate with other reports required by this order. And in section 5, there's an Endangered Species Act. Identify planned or potential actions to facilitate the nation's energy supply that may be subject to the regulation on consultations in emergencies. May is a key word there. And then the ESA regulation on consultations in emergency. Agencies are directed to use to the maximum extent permissible under applicable law the consultations in emergencies, and I found that there is a document on that, and they want the Director of Fish and Wildlife or authorized representative to consult with agencies. And then I stopped highlighting. So let's see here. Oh, that's the same document, and then I can. Oh. Okay, so I'll look at the report. So there is a book called the Consultation Handbook. Let's see, and then in emergency, I'll have to look at for emergency coordination. So there's section 7 of, I think it's the Endangered Species Act. What regulations recognize that an emergency, natural disaster, or other calamity may require expedited consultations. And then it says, well, emergency actions are required that may affect listed species and or critical habitats. A federal agency may not have the time for the administrative work required by the consultations. And then it says emergency consultations should be handled with as much understanding of the action's agency's critical missions as possible, while ensuring that anticipated actions will not violate Section 7A, 2, or 7D. And then it's done by telephone. I don't know what face symbol is, but it should be followed as soon as possible within 48 hours. And during the initial, it says, do not stand in the way of response efforts, and during this initial contact or soon thereafter, the service's role is to offer recommendations to minimize the effect of the emergency response actions on listed species or the critical habitat. Let's see, I don't know if I highlighted anything else. But there was rules on emergencies, but they're limited. Let's see, I have another report coming up, not news item. And this news item is what happened the last time Trump withdrew from the Paris Agreement. And it's by Nick Popley. And then the U.S. is one of 4 countries in the world where there are not party to the agreement. So a lot of the article talks about how they lost credibility on the world stage by not being part of this agreement. Joe Biden rejoined the Paris Agreement in 2021, and the process, the impact was that it disrupted international climate diplomacy and damaged the U.S. credibility. And that's what the article says. It halted. There was a halt to climate finance for the global south with mitigation and adaptation efforts. And then there was a lot of environmental deregulation as well. And this article says that other nations will walk back and environmental commitments, potentially. And then China filled in a vacuum, and they invested in solar energy, and they met the renewable energy target in 2024, and they are capitalizing on solar investment. And even though they're still the biggest source of carbon pollution, they are meeting their targets, and they are filling in where the U.S. has left. So Donald Trump talks a lot about China all the time, but this is an area where Donald Trump is abandoning job opportunities, and China is filling in that gap. Let's see. Oh yeah, this is like there was a lot of like over 100 environmental regulations that were removed from energy efficiency standards for cars. And I'll point out that like that means that people won't save money from reducing the energy consumption. People would have saved a lot of money from using less fossil fuels. And then those like restrictions on power plants that were eliminated. Yeah, so that's that article. And I'll see if anyone's in the chat. So it doesn't look like anyone's in the chat, so I'll go to the next. Oh, this is of Fish and Men, Trump's California water order takes aim at Newsom and troubled smelt, by Terry Collins in USA Today. And it's this article gives a sense of like how Donald Trump views environmental issues. And then there's a quote, to route more water from across the state instead of trying to protect a nearby extinct tiny fish species. So he doesn't think highly of endangered species. And then in the executive order called Putting People Over Fish, Stopping Radical Environmentalism to Provide Water to Southern California. So he thinks protecting endangered species is radical, and then redirect California's water runoff south to help farmers and growers in Central Valley. And then I should mention I have seen that those damage from overuse of water resources, constant water. There's concern about that, and eventually, if too much water is used, then the resource of water will run out. And then it's pointed out, there's quote, "It's not really a solution, it's a signal to supporters that he's trying to do something." And that's said by Torok. And Los Angeles gets its water primarily from the Los Angeles River, Horns Valley, and the Colorado River. And it, quote, "It's a directive to find a solution where there might not even be one." And then the water flowing south of Delta is not likely to help Los Angeles with its water supply problem. And then there was science that says that there was a near extinction of the smelt, and it is a food source for larger fish, including salmon. Salmon is eaten by people. Sea bass, as well as sea lions, are near extinction. And then the government has been pumping less water out to save the fish for about 20 years. So this would roll back 20 years of some action. The act does not take into account whether a species is useful for humanity or not. It will cause any endangered species to be saved. I think that any species should be saved, yes. We shouldn't be the arbiters of who gets saved or not. But in this case, salmon and sea bass all useful to people. And then I didn't highlight anything else. So I'll go. So I did look at the executive order, which is called "Putting People Over Fish, Stopping Radical Environmentalism to Provide Water to Southern California." And then it said, "During my first term, the state of California, at the direction of its governor, filed a lawsuit to stop my administration from implementing improvements to California water infrastructure." And then he says that it's a catastrophic halt, and says that it was to protect Delta smelt and other species of fish. And then he's saying that it flows wastefully into the Pacific Ocean. So if it goes into the Pacific Ocean, I don't understand that concept. Like it's water. And then it said California needs a reliable water supply and sound vegetation management practices. There's no mention of climate change. And then within 90 days of the state of this memorandum, the Secretary of Commerce and Secretary of the Interior shall report to me regarding the progress made in implementing the policies of this memorandum and provide any recommendations regarding future implementation. And then I have this is an article. Gilbo says it's deplorable. Trump will pull out of Paris Agreement as California burns, by David Thornton. And I didn't highlight this article but it's Canada's Environment and Climate Change Minister is saying that the world needs to collectively fight climate change. And I will point out that the Canadian government isn't meeting its climate obligations. But I do agree that the world should be fighting and addressing climate change. And then it's saying that the Paris Agreement, which Canada ratified in 2016, commits countries to limit global average temperature to less than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels and pursue efforts to limit increases to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And then, according to the UN, the world is on track for a temperature increase of 2.6 to 3.1 degrees Celsius over the century. And then there was a revocation of electric vehicle mandate and other clean tech investments. This article, I didn't find the other investments, but EV investments are impacted. So there was an impact on Canada. A lot of battery plants have been purchased because of the assumption that the US would be building more electric cars. And quote, there's no question about that, and I think a lot of the automakers are going to think about how that impacts some of their plans. And John Wilkinson said that this would have implications for Canada's investment to boost electric vehicle manufacturing and Canada's mandate to phase out gas-powered cars by 2035. And then Global says that Canada can still make progress. And then all regulation can continue even if the federal US regulation doesn't. And Mark Carney spoke about the need for Canada to move ahead with climate policies even though the US is under the Trump administration might not. And then, quote, what we need to do is make sure that we're addressing these issues doing our bit making our companies more competitive, because you know what's going to happen in the United States 5 years from now? You're going to care about it again, said Carney. And you're going to have an election, you care about it again. So, yeah, that seems to be the case. Anyways, I hope that you have a good rest of your day. I will continue to look at what's happening. Oh, and executive orders, there is a term, a similar thing in Canada called orders in council. I'll quickly see if there's anything about them. Yeah, so we can look up orders in council. The last one was dated January 9th. And that's about King Charles III. And then let's see here. And I will look at environment, Calvin. So there was an order declaring that the reduction of carbon dioxide emissions from coal-fired generation of electricity regulations do not apply in Saskatchewan. So that's interesting. Why not? And that's effective January 1st, 2025 or sooner if the underlying equivalency agreement terminates or is terminated. There's the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Act, regulations amending Schedule 2 to the Greenhouse Pollution Pricing Act, amending the fuel charge regulation and repealing the Part 1 of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act regulations. Regulations amending Schedule 2 to the Greenhouse Pollution Act and repealing Part 1 of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act regulations. Alberta, in order to integrate Alberta output-based pricing system. In Ontario, with the fuel charge. Okay, so that was done in 2023. Okay, so this is interesting. I might check wetlands. Maybe there's something about wetlands. So those enactment of an order respecting the withdrawal from disposal of certain lands in the Yukon Territory, which provides the withdrawal from disposal of a number of tracts of land in the Yukon Territory until August 31st, 2005. Oh, so this is an old one. So the last one was made in 2000. Yeah, so this is something that I might look at going forward. I hope that you have a good rest of your day, and I'll check to see. Yeah, so yeah, I'll bye for now, and I'll see you another time.